Hi, my name's Sophia Walker, and last Thanksgiving my parents locked me out of my childhood bedroom to give it to my cousin who needed it more, even though I was paying half their bills. But that's not even the worst part. Before we jump in, tell me where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. When I refused to keep sending money, they sold my personal belongings and told the family I'd abandoned them. I never imagined justice would look like foreclosure papers, and the stunned expression on my mother's face when she realized whose name was on her mortgage. It was a crisp October evening in Portland, the kind where autumn leaves crunch underfoot, and the air smells like wood smoke and possibility. I was driving back to my parents' craftsman-style home in the Sellwood neighborhood, my car filled with groceries I'd picked up for the family dinner. My little Hyundai humming along the tree-lined streets felt like a metaphor for my life. Modest, reliable, and perpetually weighed down by other people's needs. My little Hyundai humming along the tree-lined streets felt like a metaphor for my life. Modest, reliable, and perpetually weighed down by other people's needs. I'd moved out 3 years earlier, scraping together enough for a small studio apartment downtown where I worked as a graphic designer. But somehow, the physical distance never translated to emotional boundaries. Every Sunday dinner, every family emergency, every bill they just couldn't quite cover this month. I showed up, checkbook in hand, the eternal safety net. As I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. There was an unfamiliar SUV parked in my usual spot, loaded with suitcases and boxes. The porch light cast long shadows across the yard, illuminating the familiar chipped blue paint of the front door and the new seasonal wreath my mother had likely bought on sale at Target. Inside, the house buzzed with activity. My mother, Helen, darted between the kitchen and dining room, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, stress lines deepening around her eyes. My father, Daniel, was helping a tall young man carry a suitcase up the stairs, my cousin Tyler, who I hadn't seen since his high school graduation 3 years ago. "Sophia," my mother called out, not pausing in her dinner preparations. "Perfect. Timing. Can you set the table? We're using the good plates tonight." I set down the grocery bags on the counter, noticing how she didn't offer a hug or even ask how my week had been. "What's Tyler doing here?" I asked, reaching for the cabinet, where the good plates lived, the ones reserved for holidays and guilt trips. "Oh, didn't your father tell you? Tyler's moving in for a while. He got that internship at Powell's corporate office. Isn't that wonderful?" She stirred something that smelled like her signature beef stew, the one she made when she wanted something. From me. "That's great for him," I said carefully, counting out plates and silverware. "Where's he staying? The basement pullout?" My mother's stirring slowed. She didn't look at me. "Well, that's what we wanted to talk to you about. Your room is the only one with the desk and proper lighting for someone who's working. The basement is much too dark." Something cold settled in my stomach. "My room? Mom, all my things are still in there. My art supplies, my books, my—" "You don't live here anymore, Sophia," she interrupted, finally turning to face me. Her expression was the practiced blend of disappointment and martyrdom I knew too well. "You have your own place. Tyler needs a proper start, and family helps family. We've already moved your things to the basement." My chest tightened. I'd paid for that desk myself, saved up for the specialty lamp that mimicked natural light for my design work. The bookshelf held my collection of first editions I'd hunted through secondhand shops. "You went through my things without asking me?" My father appeared in the doorway, Tyler hovering awkwardly behind him. Dad had that defensive set to his jaw that meant the decision was final. "It's just temporary, Soph. 6 months, maybe a year? Until he gets on his feet. You're established now. Tyler's just starting out." Tyler at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I told them I could take the basement, Sophia. Really, I don't mind." But my mother cut in. "Nonsense. Sophia understands how important first impressions are in a new job. She wouldn't want you showing up wrinkled and sleep-deprived. She turned to me with that smile that never reached her eyes. Right, sweetie. I looked between them. My father's expectant face, my mother's thinly veiled command, Tyler's discomfort. This was the moment to stand firm, to say no, to reclaim my space. But 27 years of conditioning doesn't break in an instant. Right, I echoed hollowly. Family helps family. Dinner was excruciating. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle Gregory had come to help Tyler settle in, though their version of help seemed to consist mainly of drinking my father's whiskey and reminiscing about family vacations where I was consistently cast as the difficult child. Remember that trip to the coast? Aunt Patricia laughed. Sophia refused to go crabbing because she was convinced the crabs had feelings. Always the sensitive one, my mother sighed, as if empathy were a character flaw. Tyler was always game. For anything, weren't you? Tyler smiled politely, pushing food around his plate. I couldn't hate him. This wasn't his design. He was just accepting what was offered. The real architects sat at the head of the table, masterfully reconstructing reality to suit their narrative. After dessert, I slipped away to see what remained of my space. The basement was chilly and smelled faintly of mildew. A single bulb cast harsh shadows across stacks of cardboard boxes labeled Sophia's stuff in my mother's handwriting. My bed frame had been hastily assembled in the corner, my mattress bare except for a folded sheet set tossed on top. I opened the nearest box. My clothes were stuffed inside, unfolded, some still on hangers that had snapped under the weight. Beneath that, books were piled haphazardly, pages bent. I dug deeper, looking for the blue leather case that held my grandmother's watercolor set. The only thing she'd left specifically to me. It wasn't there, or in the next box, or the next. Upstairs, the sounds of laughter drifted down. I heard Tyler saying something about decorating his room, and my mother's enthusiastic response about picking up paint samples tomorrow. His room, not my room anymore. Just like that, erased and replaced. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. In the kitchen, my mother was packaging leftovers while my father poured another round of drinks in the living room. "Mom," I said quietly, "where's Grandma's watercolor set? The blue leather case?" She didn't look up. "Oh, I put that in the craft room with my things. It seemed silly to keep it in storage when it could be used." "It's not yours to use," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Grandma left it to me specifically." "Don't be selfish, Sophia. It's still in the family." She snapped the lid on a container with more force than necessary. "Speaking of family, your father and I were going to talk to you about the property tax bill that just came in. It's a bit higher than we expected this year, and with helping Tyler get settled." There it was. The real reason for the elaborate family dinner, the beef stew, the performance of family unity. I'd been summoned to open my wallet, not to be welcomed. "How much?" I asked, the words tasting bitter. "3,000. But we can pay you back once Dad's commission comes in next month." A promise I'd heard so many times it had lost all meaning. I thought about my savings account, the one I'd been building to finally take that graphic design course in New York. 3,000 would wipe it out completely. "I'll think about it," I said, which in our family's coded language had always meant yes. My mother's smile tightened. "We need to pay it by Friday, Sophia. It's not really something we can wait on." I looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted inside me. The woman who had moved my belongings to a moldy basement without consent, who had commandeered my inheritance, who was now demanding I empty my savings account, was not looking at me with love. She was looking at me like an ATM with an inconvenient conscience. I said I'll think about it. I picked up my purse from the counter. "I need to go. Early meeting tomorrow." As I walked toward the door, I heard my father's voice from the living room. "She'll come through. She always does." The casual certainty in his tone settled over me like ice. In their story, I was the reliable supporting character, never the protagonist of my own life. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out into the October night, the chill air stinging my eyes. Or maybe those were tears. I couldn't tell anymore. That night, in my small studio apartment, I couldn't sleep. The walls seemed to close in, not because the space was tiny, but because it was all I had to show for years of hard work while my parents drained away the rest. I'd been paying their property taxes, contributing to their mortgage, covering emergency, repairs, all while trying to build my own life one painstaking brick at a time. I opened my laptop and began to go through my bank statements, adding up exactly how much I'd loaned my parents over the past 3 years. The number made me feel physically ill, $47,093. Enough for a down payment on my own home, enough to have taken that design course 10 times over. Enough to have built something real for myself. I didn't send the money for the property taxes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Instead, I texted my mother, "Need to build up my own savings right now. Can't help this month." Her response came within seconds. "We're counting on you, Sophia. Don't let the family down." No, I understand, or we'll figure something out. Just pressure and guilt, the twin currencies of our relationship. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling until dawn broke over the Portland skyline, painting my small apartment in shades of possibility I hadn't allowed myself to see before. The next week passed in a blur of ignored calls and increasingly frantic texts. I focused on my work, taking on extra freelance projects and meeting with my bank to discuss my financial situation. The advisor, a kind-eyed woman named Marissa, looked troubled as I explained the pattern of loans to my parents. "Sophia," she said gently, "this isn't sustainable. And legally, without any documentation, these aren't loans. They're gifts. You're unlikely to ever see that money again." I knew she was right, but hearing it stated so plainly made something crack inside me. What should I do? She hesitated. "I can't tell you what to do about your family. But financially, you need to stop the bleeding and start thinking about your own security." As I left the bank, my phone lit up with a text from my father. "Your mother is very upset. The tax bill is overdue. Don't make us ask your aunt and uncle for help." The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it weren't so sad. I didn't respond. 3 days later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Tyler. "Sophia?" He sounded uncomfortable. I thought you should know. Your parents are selling some of your things. They said you told them they could to cover the tax bill, but it didn't sound right to me." My blood ran cold. "What things, Tyler?" "Your desk, for starters. The guy from Craigslist just picked it up. And they've got your books boxed up for Powell's to appraise tomorrow. There was also a blue case with art supplies." "Grandma's watercolors," I whispered. "Yeah, that's gone too. Some collector came by this morning." I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking with a rage so pure it felt almost like clarity. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. It wasn't just about the room anymore, or even the money. They had sold the one thing that connected me to the grandmother, who had seen me, really seen me, when no one else did. I drove to their house in a state of cold fury, rain pelting my windshield like the universe was crying the tears I was too angry to shed. The porch light was on, but the house seemed oddly still. I used my key, the one they hadn't thought to, ask for back, and walked in. The living room was empty, but I heard voices from the kitchen. My parents, my aunt and uncle, and Tyler, all sitting around the table with papers spread out before them. "We'll just tell her we had an emergency," my father was saying. "She doesn't need to know the details." My mother nodded. Once she calms down about the watercolors, she'll send the money. She always does. I don't know, Tyler said, looking uncomfortable. Maybe you should just tell her the truth about the refi. The truth about what? I said from the doorway. 5 heads snapped up in unison. My mother recovered first, her face arranging itself into a mask of maternal concern. Sophia, we were just talking about you. Listen, about your grandmother's painting set. You sold it, I said flatly. And my desk. And you're planning to sell my books. Tyler told me. My father shot Tyler a look of betrayal. Tyler stared at his hands. Now, Sophia, my Aunt Patricia began in her patronizing tone. Family helps family. You weren't using those things, and your parents are in a tight spot. Those things weren't theirs to sell, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Just like this house isn't actually theirs, is it? That's what you're all talking about. The refinancing problem. Silence fell over the kitchen. My father cleared his throat. How did you know about that? The truth was, I hadn't known anything specific. It was a guess based on years of financial mismanagement and the papers scattered across the table. But their reactions confirmed it. Because I know you, I said simply. You've been living beyond your means for years, using me as your safety net. So what is it? Missed mortgage payments? Underwater on the loan? My mother's face hardened. This isn't your business, Sophia. You made it my business when you sold my inheritance, I countered. How bad is it? Just tell me. After a long pause, my father sighed. The bank denied our refinancing application. We're 3 months behind on payments. They're threatening foreclosure if we don't catch up by the end of the month. How much? I asked, echoing our exchange from the week before. $22,000, he admitted. But we have a plan. If we sell some things, and if you could just help with part of it. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. It wasn't joyful. It was the laugh of someone finally seeing the full picture for the first time. Let me guess. You want me to empty my savings? Again. Drain my 401k? Again. So you can stay in this house, continue living beyond your means, and call me selfish when I don't want to hand over more. That's not fair, my mother snapped. We've given you everything. No, I said quietly. You've taken everything. And I've let you, because that's what family does, right? We help each other. Except in this family, the help only flows one way. I turned to leave, but my father's voice stopped me. So that's it? You're just going to let us lose our home? Where will we go, Sophia? Have you thought about that? Had. In the sleepless nights and anxiety-filled days of the past week, I'd thought about little else. And I'd made a decision that would either save us all or sever us completely. I'll be in touch, I said, and walked out the door. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made an appointment with Elaine Rosenberg, a real estate attorney, whose name I'd found after hours of research. Her office was in a converted Victorian in the Pearl District, all polished wood and brass fixtures that spoke of stability and permanence. Let me get this straight, she said after I'd laid out the situation. You've been paying portions of your parents' mortgage and bills for years, without any formal agreement. They've sold your possessions without permission. And now they're facing foreclosure and expecting you to bail them out again. That's about the size of it, I confirmed. She leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. And what exactly do you want to accomplish here, Ms. Walker? Do you want to sue them for the sold items? Get a judgment for the money they owe? You? I took a deep breath. I want to buy their mortgage. Her eyebrows rose. That's unconventional. Are you sure that's the route you want to take? I've done my research. The bank might be willing to sell the debt at a discount since it's in arrears. I have some savings, and I've been approved for a personal loan that would cover it. I don't want to punish my parents. I just want them to understand what they've done, and I want to protect myself going forward. Elaine studied me for a long moment, then nodded. It won't be simple, and it will change your relationship with them forever. Are you prepared for that? The question hung in the air between us. Was I ready to transform from daughter to creditor? To hold the literal keys to my parents' house? But then I thought of my grandmother's watercolors, sold without a second thought, and my decision crystallized. Yes, I said firmly. I'm prepared. What followed was 2 weeks of intense negotiations, paperwork, and sleepless nights. The bank was indeed willing to sell the mortgage, at a discount, given its troubled status. Between my savings, the loan, and liquidating some investments, I was able to make it happen. Through it all, I maintained radio silence with my family, ignoring increasingly desperate messages. My mother's texts evolved from guilt-tripping, "How can you abandon us like this?" to bargaining. "If you help us this one last time, we promise, things will be different," to outright threats. "We'll tell everyone what an ungrateful daughter you are." It wasn't until all the paperwork was signed and the transaction complete that I finally responded, with a simple text, "We need to talk. I'll be over tomorrow at 7. That evening, exactly 1 year after the fateful dinner when they'd given away my room, I parked in front of their house. The porch light was out, either burned out or deliberately left dark. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a small but significant shift in how I approached their space. My father answered, looking older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. "Sophia," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and wariness, "you're here." The living room was dim, just a single lamp illuminating my mother's rigid figure on the couch. The house felt different, lighter somehow, as if some of their possessions were already gone. Preparing for the worst, probably. "We thought you'd abandoned us," my mother said without preamble. "After everything we've done for you." I sat in the armchair across from them, placing my leather portfolio on the coffee table between us. "I think we have very different memories of who's done what for whom," I said quietly. "If you've come to gloat," my father began. "I've come to discuss your mortgage," I interrupted. "Or more specifically, the foreclosure proceedings." They exchanged a glance. "We're handling it," my father said stiffly. "We don't need your judgment." "Actually," I said, opening the portfolio and sliding a document across the table, "you might want to read this." My mother picked it up reluctantly, her eyes scanning the page. I watched as confusion, then shock, then something like fear crossed her face. "What is this? Is this some kind of joke?" "What?" My father grabbed the paper. This says the mortgage has been transferred to..." He looked up at me. "To you? How is that possible?" "I bought it," I said simply. "Your debt. Your house. It all belongs to me now." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of my mother's ragged breathing. "Why?" she finally whispered. "To punish us? To make us homeless?" I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. "No, to stop the cycle. To make you see me, really see me, for the first time in my life." I pulled out another document. "This is a new agreement. You can stay in the house. You'll make payments. To me instead of the bank at a rate you can actually afford. I've worked it all out. But there are conditions." My father's hand shook as he reached for the paper. "What kind of conditions?" "First, you will never ask me for money again. Ever. Second, you will replace everything you sold that belonged to me, starting with Grandma's watercolors. Third," I took a deep breath, "you will respect my boundaries. That means no guilt trips, no manipulation, no using family as a weapon." My mother's face had gone pale. "And if we refuse? Then I'll be forced to enforce the existing mortgage terms, which you're already in violation of." I kept my voice level. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be your adversary, but I refuse to be your ATM anymore. My father stared at the document for a long time. You're serious about this? Completely. We're still your parents, my mother said, a note of desperate authority in her voice. Yes, you are, I agreed. And I still love you. But love without respect isn't healthy for any of us. I'm offering you a way forward that protects everyone. They didn't sign the agreement that night. I didn't expect them to. Instead, I left it with them, along with my attorney's card, and walked out into the crisp Portland evening feeling lighter than I had in years. 3 days later, I received a text from my father. We'll sign. Can you come over on Saturday? When I arrived, the house was different. My old desk was back in its place in my old room, though Tyler still occupied it. A package sat on the dining table, a blue leather case, not my grandmother's original, but an identical replacement. And my parents were different too. Subdued. Yes, but also present in a way they hadn't been before. We didn't understand, my mother said as we sat down with the papers. We thought because we raised you, because we're family, that meant… She trailed off. That I owed you indefinitely, I finished for her. She nodded slowly. It wasn't right. We see that now. I don't know if they really understood everything that day. Real change takes time, and our relationship had decades of unhealthy patterns to overcome. But as they signed the agreement, something shifted between us. A rebalancing, a reset. 6 months later, they haven't missed a payment. Our Sunday dinners have resumed, but they're different now. No financial ambushes, no subtle digs. Just family, trying to rebuild on healthier ground. Tyler moved out to his own place, and my old room has become a neutral space, neither shrine nor battleground. The watercolor set sits in my apartment now, where I've finally started using it, channeling my grandmother's spirit into landscapes that somehow always look like new beginnings. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like boundaries finally honored and respect finally given. Sometimes it looks like the moment your parents see you, really see you, not as an extension of themselves or a resource to be tapped, but as a whole person with value beyond what you can give them. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect yourself? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button, because healing from family wounds is a journey we shouldn't have to walk alone. On the last morning of the workshop, as my students proudly displayed their projects, Tyler appeared unexpectedly, slipping into the back of the room with a smile and a wave. He waited until everyone had dispersed before approaching, examining the colorful array of paintings with genuine interest. These are great, he said, gesturing to the drying watercolors. Your students seem really enthusiastic. They are, I agreed, cleaning brushes at the sink. It's been surprisingly rewarding. What brings you here on a Saturday morning? He shifted, suddenly looking less certain. I wanted to talk to you about something. Your parents, actually. I paused, water running over my hands, a familiar tension creeping into my shoulders. What about them? They're thinking of downsizing, he said. The house is too big for just the two of them, and even with the new payment structure you arranged, they're realizing it doesn't make financial sense to keep it. I shut off the water, dried my hands slowly. They haven't mentioned anything to me. I think they're worried about how you'll take it, Tyler admitted. Since you own the mortgage and everything, they don't want you to think they're ungrateful. I considered this information, testing my reaction to it. Surprisingly, there was no anger, no sense of rejection, just a practical recognition that it might indeed be the sensible choice. It's their decision, I said finally. The agreement gives them the right to sell, as long as the mortgage is paid off from the proceeds. They don't need my permission. Tyler nodded, relief evident in his expression. That's what I told them. But they wanted me to feel you out first. They're looking at condos near Forest Park. Something smaller, more manageable. That makes sense. I began packing up my supplies, tucking brushes into their case. Will you tell them, or should I call them directly? Actually, Tyler said, they were hoping you might come to dinner tomorrow, to discuss it properly. He hesitated. I think this is their way of trying to include you in the decision, rather than just presenting you with a fait accompli. The invitation hung between us. 6 months ago, a family dinner would have been fraught with hidden agendas and financial ambushes. Now, it felt like progress, an attempt at transparent communication rather than manipulation. Okay, I said. Tell them I'll be there at 6. The next evening, I drove to my parents' house with a strange mix of emotions. This place had been the setting for so much of our complicated dynamic, both the warm memories of childhood and the tension of my adult years. The thought of them leaving it stirred something unexpected in me. Not resistance exactly, but awareness of yet another shift in our evolving relationship. My mother answered the door, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. The forced elegance that had characterized her appearance for years had softened into something more natural. She wore simple slacks and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. "Sophia," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming. Dinner's almost ready." The house smelled of roasting chicken and herbs, a familiar comfort. In the dining room, the table was set simply but carefully, with candles and cloth napkins. My father emerged from the kitchen carrying a bottle of wine. "Just in time," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Hope you're hungry." The conversation during dinner flowed more easily than I expected. We talked about my art workshop, about my father's consulting work, about my mother's garden club. Normal family topics, unmarked by the usual undercurrents. It wasn't until dessert, apple crisp made with fruit from the tree in their backyard, that they broached the real reason for the invitation. "Sophia," my father began, "Tyler probably mentioned we're thinking about selling the house." I nodded, taking a small bite of the warm dessert. "He did. I think it makes a lot of sense, actually." My mother looked surprised at my easy acceptance. "You do?" "The house is too big for 2 people," I said simply. "And the maintenance costs must be significant. From a purely financial perspective, downsizing is logical." "It's not just the finances," my father admitted. "Though that's certainly part of it. This house, it holds a lot of history. Some good, some difficult. We're thinking it might be time for a fresh start." I understood what he wasn't saying explicitly. This house had been the setting for our dysfunctional patterns, the place where they had manipulated and I had enabled. Perhaps new surroundings would help solidify our healthier boundaries. "I think that's fair," I said. "Have you found anything?" "Promising." Relief visibly swept across my mother's face. "We've looked at a few places. There's a condo complex near Forest Park that we like. 2 bedrooms, enough space for us, but not too much to maintain. And..." She hesitated. "It would leave us with enough from the sale to pay off the mortgage entirely, plus a small cushion for retirement." I nodded, genuinely pleased for them. "That sounds perfect." "We wanted to talk to you first," my father said. "Since you own the mortgage, we didn't want you to feel like we were, I don't know, rejecting what you did for us." The acknowledgement of my help, without minimizing or dismissing it, felt significant. "I appreciate that," I said honestly. "But the whole point of our arrangement was to help you find stability, not to trap you in a specific situation. If selling makes sense, for your future, I support it completely." My mother reached across the table and briefly touched my hand, the first spontaneous physical contact she'd initiated in months. "Thank you, Sophia." After dinner, as I prepared to leave, my father walked me to the door. "There's something else we wanted to ask you," he said, his expression serious. We'd like you to help us choose the new place. Your perspective, your eye for detail, it would be valuable to us." The request struck me deeply. Not because they needed my financial input or practical assistance, but because they genuinely valued my opinion. It was a different kind of inclusion than I'd experienced with them before. Not obligation disguised as family duty, but a sincere desire for connection. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. Over the next few weeks, I accompanied my parents to view several condos. The process was surprisingly enjoyable. Without the pressure of financial entanglement, we were able to interact more as adults with shared interests than as people locked in a toxic pattern of giving and taking. The condo they eventually chose was perfect for them. A corner unit, with large windows, a small balcony for my mother's container garden, and a layout that maximized the modest square footage. The building had a community room for entertaining and was walking distance to shops and parks. "What do you think?" my mother asked as we stood in the empty living room during the final walkthrough. "I think it suits you," I said honestly. "It feels like a new chapter." She nodded, looking around the space with a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. "It's strange, letting go of the house after all these years, but also freeing." "Fresh starts can be that way," I agreed. The closing date was set for the end of May. In the weeks leading up to it, my parents began the process of downsizing their possessions, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to donate. They approached the task with unexpected thoughtfulness, not clinging desperately to things as I might have expected. One Saturday, my mother called and asked if I'd come over to look through some boxes they'd found in the attic. "There are things of yours," she explained. "School projects, report, cards, photos. We thought you might want to go through them before we pack everything up." When I arrived, the dining room table was covered with cardboard boxes, each labeled neatly in my mother's handwriting. Sophia, elementary school. Sophia, high school. Family photos, and so on. "We didn't realize we had so much," my father said a bit sheepishly. "We never were good at organizing." I opened the nearest box and found myself staring at a collection of childhood art projects: handprint turkeys from Thanksgiving, construction paper hearts for Valentine's Day, watercolor paintings from elementary school. My parents had kept everything, apparently, even as they'd sometimes made me feel that my creative pursuits were frivolous compared to more practical concerns. "I can't believe you saved all this," I said, lifting out a particularly enthusiastic finger painting from what must have been kindergarten. "Of course we did," my mother said, sounding surprised. "You were always so creative. Even as a little girl, you saw the world differently than most people." Her words, spoken so casually, hit me with unexpected force. Had they always seen that in me? Had they valued it, in their own way, even as they pushed me toward more practical paths? We spent the afternoon going through the boxes together, reminiscing about school plays and family vacations, laughing at forgotten mishaps and embarrassing fashion choices captured in photographs. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation scene from a movie. There were still awkward moments, still careful navigations around painful topics. But there was also genuine connection, shared memories acknowledged from all perspectives. As we worked, I found a small leather-bound book at the bottom of one box. Opening it, I discovered my mother's handwriting, dates and brief descriptions of my childhood milestones. Sophia's first steps, April 12th, reached for her stuffed rabbit and just stood up and walked. Sophia's first day of kindergarten, so brave, didn't cry at all when we left. Sophia's art display at school, the teacher said she has remarkable talent for her age. I looked up at my mother, who was sorting through a stack of report cards. "You kept a journal about me?" She glanced over, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Just for a few years. I always meant to continue it, but life got busy." She hesitated. "You should take it. It belongs to you." I tucked the journal into my bag, touched by this evidence of early care and attention that had somehow gotten lost in the complications of our later relationship. By the end of the day, we'd sorted everything into 3 piles: things for me to take, things for my parents to keep, and things to donate or discard. The process had been unexpectedly healing, a tangible sorting of our shared past as we prepared for separate but connected futures. The day of the move came. Quickly. I had offered to help, and to my surprise, they had accepted without argument or expectation. The moving company handled the furniture and larger items, while we carried boxes of personal belongings, photos, kitchen essentials. As we worked, I noticed my father pausing in the empty living room, looking at the marks on the wall where pictures had hung, the slight indentation in the carpet where the couch had stood for years. "Strange to leave it behind," I said, coming to stand beside him. He nodded. "So many memories in these walls, good and bad." He glanced at me. "I'm sorry for the bad ones, Sophia. More than I can say." The simple apology, offered without prompting or expectation, meant more than any elaborate gesture could have. "I know, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, too, for my part in it all." We stood there for a moment in companionable silence, both acknowledging that the past couldn't be erased, only learned from. "Ready for the next load?" My mother called from the doorway, breaking the moment. By evening, the essential unpacking had been done. The new condo was cluttered with boxes, but the furniture was in place, the kitchen functional, the beds made. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor of the living room, exhausted but satisfied with the day's work. "It looks good," I said, glancing around at the new space. "It feels good, too." My mother nodded. "A fresh start, like you said." As I prepared to leave, my father handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "The final mortgage payment," he said, "from the proceeds of the house sale, as agreed." I took the envelope, feeling the weight of it in my hands. This represented the end of our financial entanglement, the formal conclusion of the arrangement that had reset our relationship. "Thank you," I said, tucking it into my bag. My mother stepped forward awkwardly. "We were thinking," she began, then stopped, looking to my father for support. "We'd like to have dinner," he continued, "once a month or so. Not obligation, not family duty. Just getting to know each other as we are now." The invitation hung in the air between us, significant in its simplicity. No financial strings attached, no manipulation disguised as familial responsibility, just a genuine desire for connection. "I'd like that," I said, meaning it completely. Walking to my car in the soft spring evening, I felt a profound sense of closure mixed with new beginning. The mortgage had been paid off, the family home sold. The physical representations of our dysfunctional patterns had been dismantled. What remained was the possibility of something new. Not perfect, not without the occasional tension or miscommunication, but fundamentally different from what had come before. A relationship based on choice rather than obligation, on seeing rather than using, on respect rather than manipulation. As summer bloomed across Portland, my life settled into new rhythms. My weekend watercolor workshops had become surprisingly popular, with a waiting list forming for the next session. My graphic design work continued to provide steady income, and I'd begun saving again, this time for a down payment on a small house of my own. My parents adapted well to condo living. My mother joined a community garden project nearby, channeling her energy into growing vegetables and flowers in her allotted plot. My father found a part-time consulting position that kept him engaged, without overwhelming him. They lived more modestly than before, but also more authentically, free from the pretense that had characterized much of their previous lifestyle. Our monthly dinners continued, sometimes at their place, sometimes at mine, occasionally at a restaurant when we felt like celebrating something. The conversations grew easier over time, less guarded, more genuine. We were learning, slowly but steadily, How to be family without the toxic patterns that had defined us for so long. One evening in late July, my mother called with an unexpected question. "Do you remember that beach house we rented when you were 12? The one on the Oregon coast?" I did remember. It had been one of the happier family vacations of my childhood, before financial pressures and dysfunctional patterns had fully taken hold. A week of beachcombing, kite flying, and evening board games by the fireplace. "We thought it might be nice to do something like that again," she continued. "Just a weekend. The three of us. Tyler, too, if he's available." The invitation surprised me. Not because it wasn't welcome, but because it represented yet another step in our evolving relationship. A willingness to create new memories rather than just trying to repair the damage of old ones. "I'd like that," I said. "Let me check my calendar." We rented a small cottage in Cannon Beach for the last weekend of August. It wasn't the same one from my childhood, that had long since been sold or remodeled beyond recognition, but it had the same cozy feel, the same easy access to the beach, the same view of Haystack Rock in the distance. Tyler joined us for the first day, bringing board games and a cooler full of local craft beers. We spent the afternoon on the beach, building an elaborate sand castle that made passing children stop and stare in admiration. "Architecture training comes in handy," Tyler joked, carefully sculpting a turret with damp sand. That evening, after Tyler had headed back to Portland for a work commitment, the three of us sat on the cottage's small deck, watching the sunset, paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The silence between us was comfortable, unforced. "I've been thinking," my father said eventually, "about what happened last year. The room, the watercolors, all of it." He looked out at the darkening ocean. "I don't think we ever really explained why we acted that way." My mother shifted in her chair. "Daniel, maybe now isn't—" "No, it's important," he insisted gently. "Sophia deserves to understand." I waited, curious but not defensive. His tone wasn't accusatory or justifying, just reflective. "We were drowning," he said simply. "Financially, emotionally. We'd been living beyond our means for years, trying to maintain an image that was never real. And you, Sophia, you were the one thing that seemed solid, the one thing we could count on." "So you took advantage," I said, not angrily, just naming the reality. He nodded, face somber in the fading light. "We did. We told ourselves it was what family does, that you owed us for raising you, that it was temporary. But deep down, we knew it was wrong. We just couldn't admit it, even to ourselves." "Ha," my mother reached out, her hand finding mine in the gathering darkness. "When you bought the mortgage, forced us to face what we'd been doing, it was humiliating. But it was also, eventually, freeing. You made us see ourselves clearly for the first time in years." I squeezed her hand gently. "I didn't do it to punish you. I just couldn't see any other way to break the cycle. We know that now," my father said, "and we're grateful, Sophia. Not just for the financial help, but for the wake-up call, for the chance to rebuild something better." As night fell completely, stars appearing one by one above the vast Pacific, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Not the artificial peace of avoidance or denial, but the genuine calm that comes from truth acknowledged and accepted. The weekend passed in a blur of small pleasures: morning walks on the beach, fresh seafood from local restaurants, quiet evenings with books and conversation. There were still occasional awkward moments, old patterns briefly resurfacing before, being gently corrected, but overall, it felt like the beginning of something new and healthy. On the drive back to Portland, my mother asked about my next watercolor workshop. "I was thinking," she said hesitantly, "that I might like to try it. If that wouldn't be too strange, having your mother as a student." The request touched me deeply. Not because she was suddenly interested in art, though that was nice, but because she was making an effort to understand and participate in something important to me. to see me as I was, not as she wished me to be. "I think that would be lovely," I said. "The next session starts in 2 weeks." Back in the city, life resumed its normal pace. I continued teaching my weekend workshops, my mother becoming one of my most enthusiastic students. My father occasionally joined her, not to paint, but to watch, genuinely curious about this part of my life he'd never fully appreciated before. One evening in early October, exactly a year after the night my cousin had moved into my room, I sat in my apartment going through old photos. The leather journal my mother had given me lay open beside me, her neat handwriting chronicling my early years with pride and affection. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Just signed lease on my own place. No more roommates. Dinner to celebrate this weekend?" I smiled, genuinely happy for him. He had built his own life here, independent of the family drama that had initially brought him to Portland. Our friendship had evolved into something valued by both of us, no longer shadowed by the room incident that now seemed like a catalyst rather than a catastrophe. As I set my phone down, my gaze fell on a small watercolor I'd recently completed, a rendering of the beach house we'd stayed at during our weekend away. It wasn't technically perfect, but it captured something essential about the experience. The light, the sense of openness, the feeling of possibility. I decided to have it framed as a gift for my parents' upcoming anniversary. Not an expensive present, not a grand gesture, just a simple acknowledgement of our shared journey. A reminder that even after painful rupture, healing and growth were possible. The next morning, I headed to my favorite coffee shop for an early session of painting before the day's responsibilities began. The owner, Maria, waved me to my usual corner table, already set up with extra napkins and water for rinsing brushes. "Your regular?" she called, already reaching for a mug. "Please," I answered, settling into the comfortable routine. As I unpacked, my watercolor case, not my grandmother's original, but the replacement that had become special in its own way, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From displacement to empowerment, from financial entanglement to clear boundaries, from manipulation to the beginning of genuine communication. The mortgage was paid off, the family home sold, the physical representations of our dysfunctional patterns dismantled and replaced with something new and healthier. There were still challenges, still occasional missteps on all sides. Our monthly dinners weren't always easy, our communication not always perfect. But the fundamental dynamic had shifted. We were seeing each other clearly at last, with all our flaws and strengths. I opened my sketchbook to a fresh page and began to paint, letting colors flow across the paper in patterns. That felt right. That expressed what words couldn't quite capture, not the pain of the past or anxiety about the future, but the present moment, complex, imperfect, and alive with possibility. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment or revenge. Sometimes it looks like boundaries finally honored and respect finally given. Sometimes it looks like the moment your parents see you, really see you, not as an extension of themselves or a resource to be tapped, but as a whole person with value beyond what you can give them. And sometimes healing doesn't come from grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but from small, consistent choices made day after day, the decision to respect yourself enough to say no, the courage to offer second chances without sacrificing your own well-being, the wisdom to recognize that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. As the morning light strengthened, casting my corner of the coffee shop in a warm glow, I continued painting, adding layers, adjusting colors, finding balance in the composition. Much like life itself, a process of continual refinement, of learning from mistakes, of creating something meaningful from the materials at hand. Outside, Portland was waking up. People hurried past the window, heading to work or school or appointments, lives intersecting briefly before continuing on their separate paths, each with their own story, their own struggles, their own journey toward wholeness. I added one final brushstroke to my painting and sat back to consider the result. Not perfect. Not finished in the absolute sense, but complete for now. A snapshot of this moment in time, this phase of my ongoing story. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Looking forward to class this weekend. Bringing those watercolor pencils you recommended." I smiled, feeling a gentle warmth spread through me. Not the overwhelming gratitude of the past, weighted, with obligation and expectation, but something lighter, cleaner. Appreciation for this new beginning, this careful rebuilding of trust, one small interaction at a time. I texted back, "Looking forward to it too. We'll be working on landscapes this week." Setting my phone aside, I returned to my painting, adding small details here and there, knowing when to stop, when to let the work breathe on its own. A skill that applied to more than just art, knowing when to act and when to allow, when to speak and when to listen, when to hold on and when to let go. The mortgage was paid, the boundaries established, the healing begun. Not an ending, but a continuation, a new chapter in a story still being written day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. And in that ordinary morning, in that corner of a busy coffee shop, brush in hand and colors spreading before me, I found myself exactly where I needed to be. Not defined by past wounds or future anxieties, but fully present in the now. Creating something new from the materials of my life, not perfect, but authentically mine. It was the first Thursday in November when the certified letter arrived. I'd just returned from meeting a potential client, my portfolio tucked under my arm, cheeks flushed from the autumn chill. The envelope sat innocuously on my doormat, official and impersonal. My first thought was a tax issue, or perhaps some problem with the loan I'd taken out to buy my parents' mortgage. I set my things down and opened it carefully, sliding out a single sheet of paper. As I read, my hands began to tremble slightly. "Notice of inheritance," the heading proclaimed. My grandmother, my father's mother, had died 3 weeks ago, and apparently, she'd left me something significant. I sank onto my couch, emotions washing over me in waves. Grief came first. I had been close to my grandmother as a child, before family dynamics and geographical distance had created a chasm. Guilt followed. I hadn't known she was ill. Hadn't called in months. Then confusion. Why hadn't my parents told me? My grandmother had lived in Arizona for the past decade. I knew my father spoke with her occasionally, though their relationship had always been strained. But surely her death warranted a phone call, even with our complicated history. I reached for my phone and called my father. He answered on the third ring, his voice neutral. "Sophia, I was just thinking about you." "Grandma Rose died," I said without preamble. "Why didn't you tell me?" A long silence, then a heavy sigh. "I was going to, at our dinner next week. It's complicated." "Complicated how? She was my grandmother, Dad. I had a right to know." "Yes," he admitted quietly. "You did. I'm sorry, Sophia. It's been difficult to process. We weren't on the best terms at the end." I softened slightly, hearing the genuine regret in his voice. "The letter says she left me something. Her house in Arizona?" Another pause, longer this time. "Yes. And some investments. It's substantial." My mind raced, trying to make sense of this information. My grandmother had been comfortable but never wealthy from what I understood. "Why me? Why not you?" "That's the complicated part," he said. "Mom and I had a falling out years ago, about money, ironically enough. She didn't approve of how your mother and I managed our finances, said we were setting a bad example." His voice held a mixture of bitterness and grudging acceptance. Turns out she was right. I absorbed this, connecting pieces I hadn't seen before. My grandmother's occasional references to living within your means, during my childhood visits. Her modest lifestyle despite having the resources for more. The way my parents had gradually stopped talking about her, stopped arranging visits. She saw the pattern, I murmured, more to myself than to my father. Yes, he agreed, surprising me with his candor. And she tried to warn us. We didn't listen. Then, after everything that happened with you last year, with the mortgage, I reached out to her, told her what happened, how you helped us see reality, how we were trying to change. You told her about that? I was stunned. My father had never been one to admit mistakes, especially to his own mother. I did, he said simply. She was proud of you, Sophia. Said you had more sense than both of us combined. The tears came then, silent but steady. For the grandmother, I'd lost touch with, for the validation she had offered, even from a distance. For the courage my father had found to be honest about our family's dysfunction. I need to go to Arizona, I said when I could trust my voice again. To see the house, to handle the legal details. Your mother and I could come with you, he offered hesitantly. If you want. The offer hung between us, significant in its tentative nature. Not an assumption of involvement, but a request. A recognition of my autonomy, my right to choose whether they were part of this process. Let me think about it, I said. I'll let you know. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment for a long time, the inheritance letter on my lap, my thoughts swirling. My grandmother had seen clearly what I had only gradually come to understand, the toxic financial patterns in my family, the way money had been used as both weapon and chain. And somehow, from a distance, she had recognized my efforts to break that cycle, had been proud of me, had left me a legacy that felt like more than just property and investments, a vote of confidence, a recognition of my strength. The next day, I called the attorney listed in the letter. The details were both simpler and more complex than I'd imagined. The house in Sedona was paid off, worth approximately $450,000 in the current market. The investments, primarily conservative, mutual funds and bonds, amounted to just over $300,000. There was also a smaller account specifically designated for my father, with a stipulation that it could only be accessed for medical emergencies or education. She was very clear about her wishes, the attorney explained. Everything was meticulously documented. I scheduled a trip to Arizona for the following week. After careful consideration, I called my parents. I'd like you both to come, I said. This feels like something we should handle together. The relief in my mother's voice was palpable. Thank you, Sophia. That means a lot. We flew to Phoenix on a Tuesday morning, the three of us seated in a row, an arrangement that would have felt impossible a year earlier. My mother took the window seat, my father the aisle, with me between them. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Did you ever visit Grandma in Sedona? I asked as the plane reached cruising altitude. My mother shook her head. No. Your father went, once about 5 years ago. It didn't go well. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I tried to borrow money, he admitted, his voice low. For that kitchen renovation we never finished. Mom refused. Said she wouldn't enable our fiscal irresponsibility. I was furious. Didn't speak to her for months. The honesty of his confession struck me. 6 months ago, he would have offered justifications, explanations of why his mother had been unreasonable. Now he simply stated the facts, owning his part in the estrangement. She invited me to visit several times, I said. In college, and after. I always meant to go, but there was never enough time, never enough money for the flight. I paused, the irony hitting me. Because I was always helping you with bills. My mother reached across me to squeeze my father's hand, a gesture of solidarity, but also, I thought, of shared accountability. We have a lot to make up for, she said quietly. to you and to Rose." The words hung in the air between us, not accusatory, but simply true. For the first time, it felt like we were all seeing the same reality, no longer distorted by denial or defensiveness. Sedona welcomed us with breathtaking vistas of red rock formations set against a brilliant blue sky. We rented a car at the Phoenix airport and drove north, the landscape transforming from urban sprawl to desert beauty. As we approached my grandmother's neighborhood, my anticipation grew. This place that had been part of her life for a decade, that she had now entrusted to me. The house itself was a surprise. Not the lavish estate some part of me had imagined, but a modest southwestern-style home tucked against a hillside, with a small courtyard garden full of drought-resistant plants and cacti. The key was where the attorney had said it would be, hidden in a lockbox beside the garage. "It's perfect," I breathed as we stepped inside. The interior was simple but beautiful, with terracotta floors, exposed wooden beams, and large windows that framed the stunning landscape beyond. The furnishings were minimal but carefully chosen: a comfortable sectional sofa, a sturdy dining table with chairs for 6, bookshelves filled with volumes on art, travel, and philosophy. "This is so, Mom," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "Practical but beautiful. Nothing wasted, nothing excessive." We moved through the rooms slowly, absorbing the essence of the woman who had lived here. The kitchen with its well-used but immaculate appliances, the small office where she had apparently managed her investments with meticulous care, the guest bedroom, made up with fresh linens as if she had been expecting visitors, and then the II studio, a converted sunroom at the back of the house filled with light and air. Easels stood ready, brushes were arranged in ceramic jars, and canvases in various stages of completion leaned against the walls. Watercolors, oils, acrylics. My grandmother had apparently explored them all. "I had no idea she painted," I said, stunned by this revelation. My father looked equally surprised. "Neither did I. She must have started after moving here." On a small desk in the corner, a leather-bound journal lay open. I approached it cautiously, feeling like an intruder but drawn to this window into my grandmother's inner life. The page displayed a sketch of one of the red rock formations visible from the studio window, with notes about light and shadow in a neat, precise handwriting I recognized from childhood birthday cards. Below the sketch, a brief entry. "Sophia. Would love the light here. Must remember to invite her again for her birthday next month." The date on the entry was just 3 months ago. My throat tightened. She had been thinking of me, planning to reach out, and I had been so wrapped up in my own life, my own healing process with my parents, that I hadn't made the time to connect with her. "She wanted me to visit," I said softly. I kept putting it off. My mother came to stand beside me, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "We all have regrets, Sophia. But look at all this." She gestured to the studio, the evidence of my grandmother's creative life. "She found joy here. She was thinking of you with love. Hold on to that." We spent the day exploring the house, discovering the details of my grandmother's life. A photo album revealed her involvement in a local arts community. Friends of various ages gathered at gallery openings and outdoor painting sessions. Her refrigerator held a calendar marked with book club meetings and volunteer shifts at a nearby elementary school. She had built a full, meaningful life here, far from the family tensions that had marked her earlier years. That evening, we sat in the courtyard as the setting sun painted the red rocks in deepening shades of crimson and gold. The air was cool and fragrant with desert sage. "What will you do with the house?" my father asked, his tone carefully neutral. Not pushing, just curious. I considered the question, looking out at the spectacular view. "I'm not sure yet. It feels important to spend some time here first, to understand what this place meant to her." He nodded, accepting my uncertainty without pressing for a definitive plan. Another small indication of our changing dynamic. Whatever you decide, my mother said, it should be what's right for you, not what you think we would want. The statement, so different from the expectations and manipulations of the past, warmed me. Thank you, I said simply. Over the next few days, we sorted through my grandmother's belongings, organized her papers, and met with her friends and neighbors. Each conversation revealed another facet of the woman she had become in this place. Engaged, creative, generous, but pragmatic. Her financial records showed regular donations to arts education programs and a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, but always within careful budgetary limits. She lived her values, I commented to my father as we reviewed her charitable giving. Consistently. He nodded, a mixture of pride and regret in his expression. She tried to teach me that. I wasn't ready to hear it. He glanced up at me. You take after her more than I ever did. The compliment, unexpected and genuine, settled warmly in my chest. Not because I needed his approval, but because it represented a level of insight and honesty that had been missing from our relationship for too long. On our third night in Sedona, I couldn't sleep. The unfamiliar bed, the weight of decisions to be made, the emotional complexity of this unexpected inheritance. It all swirled in my mind, keeping rest at bay. Eventually, I gave up trying, wrapped myself in a blanket, and padded out to the courtyard. The night was clear, the desert sky ablaze with stars in a way I'd never experienced in Portland. I settled into a lounge chair, gazing upward, feeling simultaneously small under the vast cosmos and somehow connected to something larger than myself. I heard the sliding door open quietly behind me. My mother stepped out, similarly wrapped in a blanket. Couldn't sleep either? She asked, taking the chair beside mine. Too much to process, I admitted. She nodded, looking up at the stars. It's beautiful here. Peaceful. I can see why Rose loved it. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sound the soft chirping of desert insects and the distant call of a night bird. I owe you an apology, Sophia, my mother said eventually, her voice soft in the darkness. Not just for the financial manipulation, though certainly for that, but for something deeper. I turned to look at her, her profile illuminated only by starlight. What do you mean? She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. I never encouraged your creativity the way Rose would have. I saw how you loved art, how you expressed yourself through color and form, even as a child. But instead of nurturing that, I pushed you toward what I thought was practical, secure. The observation struck me deeply. It was true. My artistic inclinations had always been treated as hobbies, diversions, never serious pursuits worthy of investment or attention. Why? I asked, not accusatory but genuinely curious. She sighed, a sound filled with old regrets. Fear, mostly. My own parents struggled financially. My father was an artist, talented but undisciplined with money. We never knew from month to month if the bills would be paid. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. I swore my children would never feel that insecurity. So I pushed for stability, practicality, and in the process, I may have stifled something essential in you. The confession felt like a missing puzzle piece slotting into place. My mother's obsession with financial status, with appearances, with my practical career choices, all stemming from her own childhood wounds, her own desperate need for security. I understand, I said softly. That makes sense, in its way. But it wasn't fair to you, she insisted. And the irony is, for all my focus on financial security, we ended up creating exactly the kind of instability I feared most. She gestured toward the house. While Rose, who valued creativity and authenticity, built this solid, beautiful life. The observation hung between us, profound in its truth. My practical, finance-focused parents had created chaos through overextension and denial. My supposedly impractical grandmother had created stability through mindfulness and moderation. "It's not too late, you know," my mother continued after a moment, "for you to explore your creativity more fully. These watercolor workshops you've been teaching, they seem to bring you joy." I nodded, surprised by her perception. "They do. More than I expected. Rose would be pleased, I think, that you're finding your way back to that part of yourself." We fell silent again, contemplating the stars and the strange, winding paths that had led us all to this moment. "What if," I said slowly, an idea forming as I spoke, "what if I kept the house, at least for now? Used it part of the year, maybe. Rented it out when I'm not here? I could teach workshops here sometimes, like Grandma was doing." My mother turned to me, her face thoughtful in the darkness. "You'd split your time between Portland and here?" "Maybe. I'd have to figure out the logistics. But this place, it feels significant, not just as property, but as a legacy of sorts. A different way of being in the world than what I grew up with." She reached over and squeezed my hand briefly. "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea, Sophia, and very much in the spirit of what Rose would have wanted." The next morning, I woke with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt since receiving the inheritance letter. Over breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, I shared my tentative plan with my father. "I'd like to keep the house," I explained, "as a second home, a place to explore my art more seriously. Maybe even teach workshops here part of the year?" He nodded, spreading jam on his toast with careful attention. "That makes sense. It's a special place." "The investments," I continued. "I'm thinking of using part of them to buy a small place in Portland. Something that's mine, that I own outright." The words felt significant. Ownership, security, independence. All things I had helped provide for my parents at the expense of my own stability. "You should," my father agreed without hesitation. "After everything, you deserve that foundation." The simple acknowledgement, offered without defensiveness or qualification, meant more than he could know. "As for the account Grandma set up for you," I added, "the attorney said it can only be accessed for medical needs or education. I was thinking, maybe you could take some of those financial management courses Mom mentioned. Really invest in building those skills." He was quiet for a moment, and I worried I had overstepped, reverted to the pattern of telling them what to do with their money. But then he nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's a good idea," he said. "Your mother's course has been eye-opening for her. It would probably help me too." My mother joined us, coffee mug in hand. "What would help you?" Sophia suggested. "I take some financial courses too, using the fund Mom set up." She smiled, sitting beside him at the small kitchen table. "We could do it together, make it a project." The simple exchange, my parents discussing self-improvement, planning for their future with realistic goals rather than magical thinking, felt like witness to a minor miracle. Not a complete transformation, but a significant shift in the right direction. We spent our final day in Sedona meeting with the attorney to formalize my decisions about the inheritance, then visiting some of my grandmother's favorite places. A small art gallery where she had occasionally shown her work, a cafe where she had met her book club, a hiking trail with spectacular views of the Red Rocks. As we walked the trail, my father fell into step beside me, my mother a few paces ahead, pausing to photograph wildflowers. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about Rose's legacy being more than just property, about it representing a different way of being in the world." I glanced at him, surprised by his philosophical tone. "Yes. I think she was trying to show me that for years," he admitted. "The way she lived, her priorities. It was all there. I just couldn't see it, because I was so caught up in keeping up appearances, in the cycle of spending and debt. He paused at a viewpoint, looking out over the vast landscape stretching before us. When I came to visit that time, when she refused to loan me money for the kitchen, she said something I've been thinking about a lot since we arrived here. "What was that?" I asked. She said, "Daniel, wealth isn't about what you own or how others see you. It's about having enough and knowing it's enough." I was offended at the time, thought she was being judgmental, out of touch. He shook his head at the memory. But she was right. She found contentment here, with less than what your mother and I thought we needed, and she was happier for it. The insight, coming from my father who had for so long chased status and external validation, felt profoundly significant. "That's beautiful," I said, "knowing when it's enough." "I'm still learning," he said with a rueful smile. "But being here, seeing how she lived, it helps." We continued along the trail, the three of us together but each lost in our own thoughts, our own reckonings with the past and possibilities for the future. That evening, our last in Sedona, I found myself drawn to my grandmother's studio. The space called to me, with its perfect light and sense of creative possibility. I sat at her desk, leafing through her journal, finding sketches, notes about colors and techniques, occasional reflections on life and aging and the beauty of the desert. And then, tucked between the pages, an envelope with my name written on it in her distinctive hand. My heart raced as I carefully opened it, unsure when it had been written or what it might contain. The letter inside was dated just 2 months before her death. "My dear Sophia," it began, "if you're reading this, then you've come to Sedona at last, though perhaps not in the way either of us would have wished. I've been thinking about legacy lately, what we leave behind, what we pass on to those we love." I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Your father called me recently. He told me about the difficulties you've all been facing, and about the remarkable way you handled it. Buying their mortgage, establishing boundaries, insisting on respect. I want you to know how proud I am of your courage and clarity." Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away to continue reading. "I recognize in you what I've spent a lifetime learning, that true wealth has little to do with money and everything to do with alignment between your values and your actions. Your father and I have had our struggles in this regard. He followed a path that prioritized appearance over substance, accumulation over appreciation. I couldn't prevent that, but perhaps I can offer you an alternative." My grandmother went on to explain her decision to leave me the house and investments. Her hope that these resources would support my journey toward a life of meaning and authenticity, rather than one defined by others' expectations. "Use these gifts in whatever way feels right to you," she wrote. "Sell everything and travel the world. Keep the house as a sanctuary. Invest in your art or your education. The choice is yours, with no strings attached. A freedom I suspect you've rarely experienced in your family dynamics." The final paragraph brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Whatever you decide, know that I see you, Sophia. Not as an extension of your parents or a solution to their problems, but as your own person, with gifts and insights that are uniquely yours. That recognition of your inherent value apart from what you can provide others may be the most important legacy I can offer. All my love, Grandma Rose." I sat with the letter for a long time, absorbing its message, feeling the weight and release of being truly seen, truly understood by someone who had walked a similar path. My grandmother had recognized the patterns in our family because she had navigated them herself, had found her way to a life of integrity and purpose despite the complications of her relationship with my father. And she had left me not just material resources, but a roadmap of sorts, a vision of possibility, of liberation from the dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. When I finally emerged from the studio, I found my parents in the living room, sitting together on the sofa, looking through old photo albums they had discovered in a bookshelf. "Everything okay?" my mother asked, noticing my reddened eyes. I nodded, the letter still clutched in my hand. "I found a message from Grandma, written before she died." "What did it say?" my father asked, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I considered how much to share, then decided on honesty. "She wanted me to know she was proud of how I handled things with you both, and that she was leaving me these resources with no strings attached, to use however I see fit." My father nodded, slowly, a complexity of emotions crossing his face. "That sounds like Mom. Clear boundaries, unconditional love." "She also said," I added carefully, "that she sees me as my own person, not as an extension of you or a solution to your problems." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "She was right," she said softly. "We didn't see you that way for too long. We're trying to now." The simple acknowledgement, offered without defensiveness or qualification, felt like another step in our healing journey, not the endpoint but progress worth recognizing. As we prepared to leave Sedona the next morning, I took one last walk through the house, saying goodbye for now, but knowing I would return. In the studio, I paused by the easel, considering the half-finished landscape my grandmother had been working on before her death. On impulse, I opened her paint box, selected a brush, and added a small stroke of color to the corner of the canvas, not changing her work, just adding my presence to it. A connection across time and space, a promise to continue what she had begun. Not just the painting, but the larger project of living with intention and authenticity. The flight back to Portland was quiet, each of us processing the experiences and revelations of the past week. As the plane descended through clouds toward the familiar green landscape of Oregon, I thought about the two places that would now define my life: Portland with its lush forests and creative energy, Sedona with its stark beauty and profound silence. Two homes, two contexts, both part of my expanding sense of self. At the airport, as we waited for our luggage, my father turned to me. "Thank you for including us in this, Sophia. It meant a lot, especially given everything." "It felt right," I said simply, a chance for all of us to understand Grandma better, and maybe ourselves too. He nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "There's something else I want to say. About the inheritance." I tensed slightly, old reflexes anticipating a request or expectation. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that your mother and I expect nothing from it. Not help with bills, not loans, not gifts. It's yours, completely and without obligation." The statement, offered unprompted and with clear intentionality, felt like a milestone in our evolving relationship. My father, who had spent years viewing me as a financial safety net, was explicitly releasing me from that role. "Thank you," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "That means a lot." My mother joined us, wheeling her suitcase. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, and meant it. "Everything is okay." As we parted ways at the terminal exit, my parents to their condo, me to my apartment, there was a new quality to our goodbye. Not the loaded farewells of the past, heavy with unspoken expectations and resentments, but something lighter, cleaner. We were connected but separate, each responsible for our own path forward. In the taxi ride home, watching the familiar streets of Portland slide by, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for the material inheritance my grandmother had left me, though that was significant, but for the larger legacy she had passed on. A model of how to live with integrity, how to establish healthy boundaries without sacrificing compassion, how to create a life aligned with one's deepest values. The blue leather watercolor case sat on my lap, the one my parents had given me to replace my grandmother's original set. I would take it with me to Sedona next time, I decided. Use it in the studio with its perfect light, perhaps teach others what I was still learning myself. That creativity isn't a luxury, but a necessity, a way of processing our experiences and connecting with our authentic selves. My grandmother had found her way to that truth in her later years. I was fortunate to be discovering it now, in time to shape the decades ahead. Not alone, but on my own terms. Not denying my family connections, but transforming them into something healthier for everyone involved. As the taxi pulled up to my apartment building, I felt a sense of homecoming that went beyond the physical space. I was returning to myself, to the person I had always been beneath the roles and expectations that had shaped so much of my life. Artist, daughter, granddaughter, teacher, all aspects of an identity that was continuously evolving, continuously expanding. My phone buzzed with a text as I unlocked my door. Tyler, checking in after hearing about our trip to Sedona. How was it? Heavy stuff, dealing with inheritances and family history. I smiled at his perceptiveness and typed a response. Intense, but good. Clarity and closure in unexpected ways. Tell you more over coffee this weekend. His reply came quickly. Absolutely. The usual place Saturday? I want to hear everything. Setting my bags down in my familiar apartment, I moved to the window that overlooked the city. Portland spread before me, mist-shrouded and green, while in my mind's eye I could see Sedona's red rocks and clear desert light. 2 landscapes, 2 homes, both now part of my story. On my desk, a small watercolor caught my eye, one of my first attempts after receiving the replacement set from my parents. Imperfect but earnest, a study in blues and greens that captured something of the Oregon coastline. Beside it, I placed my grandmother's letter, a bridge between past and future, a reminder of what was possible when one lived with intention and clarity. Tomorrow, I would call a real estate agent to begin looking for a small place of my own in Portland. Next month, I would return to Sedona to spend more time in my grandmother's house, my house now, and explore what it might mean to establish a part-time life there. In between, I would continue teaching my watercolor workshops, nurturing that creative spark my grandmother had recognized in me long before I had fully claimed it myself. The path ahead was not without challenges. Managing 2 homes, navigating the evolving relationship with my parents, balancing my design work with growing artistic pursuits, none of it would be simple. But for the first time in years, I felt equal to these complexities, grounded in a sense of self that wasn't defined primarily by others' needs or expectations. As evening settled over Portland, I opened the blue leather case and began to paint, letting colors flow onto paper without judgment or constraint. Not a masterpiece, just an exploration. A moment of presence and possibility captured in pigment and water. In Sedona, my grandmother had found her authentic voice late in life. Thanks to her example and her generosity, I had the chance to find mine much sooner. Not through rejection of my family, but through transformation of our relationships. Not through wealth itself, but through the freedom it could provide when approached with mindfulness and intention. The mortgage had been paid, the boundaries established, the healing begun. And now, unexpectedly, a new chapter was opening, one I would write on my own terms, with gratitude for the past, but not defined by it. A story of reclamation and possibility, unfolding one brushstroke, one choice, one day at a time. Spring came early to Portland that year, cherry blossoms erupting across the city in a riot of pale pink, while patches of snow still clung stubbornly to the shadows. I had just finished hanging the last painting for my first solo exhibition, a small affair at a local gallery, but a milestone nonetheless. Standing back to ensure it was level, I felt a vibration in my pocket. Tyler's name appeared on my phone screen. Dad and Helen asking about you. Haven't heard from you in weeks. Everything okay? I winced, calculating how long it had been since our last family dinner. 3 weeks? Maybe 4? Time had slipped away in a blur of preparation for the exhibition, trips back and forth to Sedona, and the final paperwork on my new Portland condo. All good, I texted back. Just swamped with the gallery show, opening tomorrow night. Would you let them know they're welcome to come? Sending official invite now. Pulling up my email, I crafted a quick message to my parents, attaching the digital exhibition announcement. Sorry for the radio silence, I wrote. Would love to see you both tomorrow if you're free. The response came faster than I expected, my mother's name appearing in my inbox within minutes. We'd be honored to attend. Is there anything we can bring? Do? The phrasing caught me off guard. Honored, not obligated. A genuine question about how they could support me, not an assumption or demand. Small shifts, but significant ones. Just your presence, I replied. Doors open at 7. Setting. My phone aside, I continued my final walkthrough of the exhibition space. The gallery was intimate, just a converted storefront in the Alberta Arts District. But the owner, Mira, had done wonders with the lighting, transforming the white-walled room into a showcase for my work. 16 paintings hung in careful arrangement, charting my artistic journey over the past year. The early pieces showed my tentative explorations with watercolor, timid landscapes, hesitant still lifes. Then came the works created during and after the Sedona inheritance, bolder in color and composition, more willing to take risks and embrace imperfection. The centerpiece, hanging on the main wall where visitors would see it first, was a large canvas I'd titled Two Horizons. On the left side, the green forested landscape of Oregon stretched toward mountains shrouded in mist. On the right, Sedona's red rocks blazed under a clear blue sky. Between them, a figure stood at a crossroads, facing forward rather than toward either landscape. Not subtle symbolism, perhaps, but honest. A visual representation of where I found myself, between two worlds, two homes, two versions of my life. Not torn between them, but integrating both into something new and wholly mine. It's stunning, Sophia, Mira said, coming to stand beside me. You've come so far in such a short time. I smiled, acknowledging the compliment while noting internally that the journey hadn't been short at all. It had been lifelong, the rediscovery of a passion long suppressed, the reclaiming of a part of myself that had been sacrificed to family dynamics and practical concerns. Thank you for taking a chance on me, I said. I know I'm hardly a established name. She waved away my gratitude. Art isn't about established names. It's about authentic voice. You have that in spades. After finalizing a few last details, I headed home to my new condo. The purchase had been completed just a month earlier. A small but sun-filled space in a converted warehouse, with high ceilings and original brick walls. Using part of my grandmother's inheritance, I'd been able to buy it outright. No mortgage. Necessary. The financial freedom this represented still felt surreal sometimes, a cushion I was only beginning to trust. The condo was still sparsely furnished, just the essentials and my art supplies. But it already felt more like home than any place I'd lived before. Perhaps because it was truly mine, chosen with only my preferences in mind. Perhaps because it represented a new chapter, one where I set the terms. That evening, I called my parents to confirm details for the exhibition opening. We'll be there, my father assured me. Your mother's been telling everyone at her garden club about it. The image made me smile. Helen Walker, once obsessed with appearances and status, now proudly promoting her daughter's modest art show to her friends. That's sweet of her. She's proud of you, he said simply. We both are. This feels like, I don't know, like you're fully becoming yourself. The observation, insightful and unexpectedly poetic coming from my practical father, touched something deep in me. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen counter, sipping tea and considering the journey that had led to this moment. Just 18 months ago, I had been displaced from my childhood room, financially entangled with my parents, my creative aspirations pushed to the margins of my life. Now I owned 2 homes, was showing my art publicly, and maintained a relationship with my family that, while still complex, was fundamentally healthier than I'd ever thought possible. My grandmother's inheritance had accelerated this transformation, providing resources that many weren't fortunate enough to receive. But the deeper shift had begun before that, with the difficult choice to buy my parents' mortgage, to establish boundaries that couldn't be ignored or crossed without consequence. Money had been the battleground, but the real war had been about something more fundamental: dignity, autonomy, the right to self-determination. Those were victories I had won through painful but necessary confrontation, through the courage to say no even when every family pattern pushed for yes. The exhibition opening arrived with the nervous flutter of anticipation I remembered from childhood piano recitals, a mixture of excitement and dread, the desire to be seen wrestling with the fear of exposure. I arrived early, wearing a simple black dress that made me feel both professional and artistic, my grandmother's silver bracelet on my wrist for courage. Mira had arranged wine and cheese platters, set out brochures with my artist statement, and created a playlist of understated jazz that complemented rather than competed with the artwork. Everything was perfect. All that remained was to see if anyone would come. By 7:15, the gallery was filling surprisingly quickly. Friends from my design work, participants from my watercolor workshops, neighbors from my building, they appeared in supportive clusters, moving through the space with glasses of wine, stopping to study each painting with flattering attention. And then my parents arrived. They entered hesitantly, my father holding the door for my mother, both dressed with obvious care. My mother scanned the room, spotted me, and waved, her smile genuine if a bit nervous. They seemed unsure of their place in this setting, this aspect of my life they'd never fully engaged with before. I excused myself from a conversation and went to greet them, accepting my mother's cautious hug and my father's awkward pat on the shoulder. "This is wonderful, Sophia," my mother said, gesturing to the gallery. "So professional." My father nodded, his eyes already drawn to the paintings. "Which ones are yours? All of them?" "Yes," I confirmed. "It's a solo exhibition." His eyebrows rose in surprise and what looked like pride. "Impressive. Can we look around?" "Of course. That's why you're here. I'll catch up with you in a bit. I need to speak with a few people." As they moved deeper into the gallery, I watched them for a moment, struck by how out of place and yet how right they looked in this setting. No longer controlling my narrative, but participating in it, witnessing rather than directing. The evening progressed in a blur of conversations, congratulations, and the surreal experience of hearing strangers discuss my work as if I weren't present. 2 paintings sold within the first hour, small pieces, but the red sold dots beside them gave me a thrill of validation I hadn't expected to feel so strongly. Near the end of the night, as the crowd began to thin, I found my parents standing before 2 horizons, deep in conversation with Mira. "The symbolism is powerful," she was saying. "The integration of contrasting landscapes into a single composition speaks to the human experience of navigating multiple identities, multiple homes." My father nodded thoughtfully. "It reminds me of Rose, Sophia's grandmother. She always found a way to honor different parts of herself, even when they seemed at odds." The observation surprised me. I hadn't consciously connected the painting to my grandmother, but he was right. The ability to contain contradictions, to find harmony in seeming opposites. That had been one of her gifts, one I was perhaps inheriting, in my own way. "Did you find anything you connected with?" I asked, joining their circle. My mother smiled, gesturing to a small watercolor near the gallery's entrance. "That sunrise piece. The colors are hopeful. It made me feel peaceful just looking at it." I nodded, pleased by her genuine response. The painting she'd selected was one of my favorites as well, created during my first morning in Sedona after inheriting the house. a moment of new beginning captured in pigment and light. "It's not for sale," Mira explained. "Sophia marked it as personal collection." "Actually," I said, making a spontaneous decision, "I'd like you to have it, Mom, as a gift." Her eyes widened. "Oh, Sophia, we couldn't possibly. Your first exhibition you should keep—" "I want you to have it," I interrupted gently. "I'll have other exhibitions, other paintings. This one belongs with you." The emotion that crossed her face was complex. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, of the significance of this gesture. Not obligation, not repayment, but freely given connection. "Thank you," she said simply, when she could speak again. "We'll treasure it." After the gallery closed, we walked together to a nearby restaurant for a late dinner. The conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected, centered on the exhibition, but occasionally branching into wider topics. My recent trips to Sedona, my father's progress in his financial management courses, my mother's growing involvement in community gardening projects. As we waited for dessert, my father leaned forward slightly. "We have some news," he said. "Nothing dramatic, but a change." I tensed instinctively, old reflexes anticipating some financial crisis or request. Then I consciously relaxed, reminding myself how far we'd come. "What kind of change?" My mother glanced at my father, then back to me. "We're considering moving to Bend. Just looking at options for now, but we're thinking it might be a good fit for this phase of our lives." Bend, a smaller city in Central Oregon, about 3 hours from Portland. Close enough for regular visits, but far enough for genuine independence. "What prompted this?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Several things," my father explained. "The financial courses have helped us realize we could live more comfortably in a slightly less expensive area. Your mother's found a gardening community there that sounds promising, and—" he hesitated. "And we think some more distance might—" "Be healthy," my mother finished. "For all of us." I considered this, testing my reaction to it. Not rejection or abandonment, as I might once have felt, but recognition of a truth we'd all been circling. True healing sometimes required space as well as connection. "I think that makes sense," I said honestly. "When would you go?" "Not for several months at least," my father assured me. "We're just beginning to research, but we wanted you to know we're considering it." The fact that they'd told me early in the process, sought my input rather than presenting a fait accompli, felt significant. Another indication of our changing dynamic. From manipulation to transparency, from assumption to invitation. "I appreciate that," I said. "And I think Bend could be really good for you both." As we walked back to our respective cars after dinner, my mother linked her arm through mine, a gesture of casual affection that would have seemed forced in the past, but now felt natural. "We're so proud of you, Sophia," she said softly. "Not just the exhibition, though that's remarkable, but who you're becoming. Who you've always been, really, beneath everything we put on you." The acknowledgement, offered without prompting, washed over me like warm light. Not because I needed her approval anymore, but because it represented a level of insight and honesty that had been missing from our relationship for too long. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." Back in my condo that night, I sat by the window overlooking the city lights, a familiar position that had become something of a ritual. A moment to reflect, to integrate the day's experiences before sleep. The exhibition had been a success by any measure. Paintings sold, connections made, positive feedback received. But the real victory was more personal, less tangible. I had created something authentic and shared it with the world, including the parents who had once prioritized practicality over creativity, security over self-expression. And they had seen me, really seen me, perhaps for the first time. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Sorry I couldn't make it tonight. Stuck at work with deadline. Mira sent photos, though. Looks amazing. Proud of you, cuz. I smiled, typing back. Thanks. Missed you there, but work comes first. Coffee this weekend to catch up. Our relationship had evolved over the past year into something neither of us could have predicted. Not quite siblings, not just cousins, but allies of a sort. Fellow survivors of our family's complex dynamics, each finding our own path forward while maintaining connection. 2 days after the exhibition opening, I received an unexpected call from Mira. Sophia, something amazing has happened, she began without preamble. A collector saw your work at the opening, Eric Sanderson. He's interested in commissioning a series of paintings for his company's new headquarters in Seattle. I sank onto my couch, stunned. A commission? But I'm hardly established. He loved your work, she interrupted. Particularly Two Horizons. Said it spoke to the company's ethos of integrating different perspectives. He wants 6 pieces in a similar style. The opportunity was both thrilling and terrifying. A professional commission was far beyond what I'd imagined at this early stage of my artistic journey. What would this involve? Time frame? Compensation? Mira outlined the details, each more surprising than the last. The commission fee was substantial, enough to cover my living expenses, for 6 months if managed carefully. The timeline was reasonable, 3 to 4 months for completion. And most importantly, creative control would remain largely mine, with only general guidelines about theme and color palette. Think about it, Mira advised. This could be a significant step in establishing yourself as a professional artist, but it's also a major commitment. After we hung up, I paced my living room, mind racing. The commission represented a potential turning point, a shift from art as personal exploration to art as professional pursuit. From hobby to vocation. From what my parents had always classified as an impractical pastime to a legitimate career path. I called my friend Amina, who had supported my creative renewal from the beginning. That's incredible, Sophia, she exclaimed after I explained the opportunity. Are you going to accept? I think so, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. It feels right, scary, but right. How will you manage it with your design work? She asked, always practical. It was a valid question. My graphic design job provided steady income and had been my financial anchor for years. Taking on a major commission would require reducing my client load, risking relationships. I'd built carefully over time. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Maybe reduce to part-time temporarily, or take a leave of absence. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you, Amina assured me. This is your moment, Sophia. You've earned it. After we hung up, I found myself reaching for the blue leather watercolor case, the replacement my parents had given me after selling my grandmother's original set. Opening it, I ran my fingers over the brushes and paint pans, tools that had once been merely recreational but were now becoming instruments of professional possibility. The decision to accept the commission wasn't just about art or career. It was another step in reclaiming my narrative, in choosing a path based on my own values rather than external expectations or obligations. Another boundary marker in the geography of my new life. I called Mira the next morning to accept the commission, then spent the day reorganizing my schedule, contacting design clients to adjust timelines, creating space for this new priority. By evening, I had a workable plan. Reduced design hours, concentrated in the mornings, with afternoons and weekends dedicated to the commissioned pieces. As I prepared dinner in my small kitchen, I realized I hadn't told my parents about the opportunity. In the past, I wouldn't have shared such news, anticipating criticism disguised as concern, practical objections to creative pursuits. But our relationship had evolved, and withholding significant developments now felt more like habit than protection. I picked up my phone and dialed their number, half expecting voicemail at the dinner hour. My mother answered on the third ring. Sophia, what a lovely surprise. I took a deep breath. I have some news. A collector who attended the exhibition has commissioned a series of paintings for his company headquarters in Seattle. A brief silence then. Oh, Sophia, that's wonderful. Professional recognition already. Your grandmother would be so proud. The response, immediate and supportive, caught me off guard despite everything. Thank you. It's a significant opportunity, but it means cutting back on my design work for a few months. In the past, this would have triggered warnings about financial stability, reminders of real-world responsibilities. Instead, my mother said, "You have to accept. Opportunities like this don't come along every day." I already did, I admitted. This morning. Good for you. Her voice warmed with genuine approval. Is there anything we can do to help? Take care of anything while you're focused on this project. The offer, practical support without taking over, assistance without assumption, represented how far we'd come. I think I'm okay for now, but thank you for offering. It means a lot. Your father will be thrilled when he hears. He's at his financial management class tonight, but I'll tell him as soon as he's home. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen, absorbing the reality of our exchange, the support freely given, the respect for my decision, the acknowledgement of my path without attempt to redirect or control it. Small shifts, accumulated over months of conscious effort on all sides, had transformed our interactions from battlegrounds into genuine connection. Not perfect, not without occasional tensions or missteps, but fundamentally different from what had come before. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity as I balanced design work with preliminary sketches for the commission. The project was challenging in the best way, stretching my skills, pushing me to clarify my artistic voice, demanding a level of professionalism I was still growing into. I established a routine, working on design projects in the mornings at my downtown office, then returning home for afternoons of painting in the small studio space I'd carved out of my condo's second bedroom. The rhythm suited me, practical, work grounding me before creative flights, steady income supporting artistic exploration. In late April, I flew to Sedona for a long weekend, seeking both respite from Portland's persistent spring rains and reconnection with my grandmother's space, my space now, though it still felt like a collaborative ownership across time. The desert greeted me with spectacular clarity, air so pure it seemed to vibrate with light. The house welcomed me with familiar warmth, everything just as I'd left it 2 months earlier. My caretaker, Ellie, a retired teacher who looked after the property when I was away, had left fresh flowers on the kitchen table and a note updating me on minor maintenance issues she'd handled. I spent the first day reacquainting myself with the house and surroundings, hiking nearby trails in the morning, sketching in the garden during the heat of afternoon, preparing simple meals in the kitchen that still held echoes of my grandmother's presence. On the second day, I set up in her studio, my studio now, and began work on the Seattle Commission in earnest. Something about the quality of light here, the way it illuminated colors with almost painful clarity, seemed perfect for what I was trying to achieve. Not reproducing Two Horizons exactly, but expanding on its themes of integration, of finding unity in apparent opposition. I lost myself in the work, hours passing unnoticed as I built up layers of color, developed compositions that spoke to each other across separate canvases, created a visual conversation about home and belonging in the spaces between. A knock at the door late that afternoon pulled me reluctantly from creative immersion. Opening it, I found my neighbor Elena, a ceramicist in her 60s who had been my grandmother's friend and occasional collaborator. "Thought I saw your car," she said with a warm smile. "Welcome back to Sedona." I invited her in, grateful for the connection to my grandmother's life here. We sat in the courtyard with glasses of iced tea, catching up on local news and my developing artistic practice. "Rose would be thrilled to see you using the studio," Elena said, gesturing toward the paint-splattered smock I still wore. She always said you had the eye, even as a child. Did she talk about me? I asked, surprised and touched. Elena nodded. Often. She kept track of you through social media, you know. Was so proud of your design work, though she wished you had. More time for pure creativity. The revelation that my grandmother had been watching from a distance, seeing me even when direct communication had lapsed, settled warmly in my chest. Another thread of connection. Another layer of being known. I'm finding that time now, I said. Better late than never, I suppose. Exactly what Rose would say, Elena agreed. She was 62 when she took her first real painting class. Used to say the second half of life was when the real work began. We talked until sunset painted the red rocks in deepening shades of crimson and gold. As Elena prepared to leave, she paused at the door. We're having an art walk in the village next weekend, she said. Local artists opening their studios to the public. Rose participated every year. Would you consider continuing the tradition? You're part of our community now, even if only part-time. The invitation touched me deeply. Acceptance into my grandmother's world, recognition as an artist in my own right, integration into a community that valued creativity as essential rather than supplementary. I'd be honored, I said, meaning it completely. After Elena left, I returned to the studio, looking at it with fresh eyes. No longer just my grandmother's space that I was borrowing, but a continuation, an inheritance in the deepest sense. Not just property but purpose, not just shelter but belonging. I texted Tyler a photo of the sunset from my courtyard. Sedona magic in full effect. How's Portland holding up without me? His response came quickly. Rainy and gray, of course. Your parents came by Powell's yesterday. Your dad bought an entire stack of financial planning books. Your mom got a gardening journal. Both asked about you. The simple update warmed me. My parents visiting my cousin's workplace, continuing their self-improvement efforts, maintaining family connections without using me as the conduit. Another indication of health slowly replacing dysfunction. Sent back. Tell them I'm painting up a storm in Grandma's studio. We'll call when I'm back in town. That night, I sat in the courtyard long after darkness had fallen, watching stars emerge in a sky untainted by city lights. The vastness above me, the solid earth beneath, the silence broken only by occasional desert sounds, all combined to create a sense of perspective that had been harder to access in Portland's urban bustle. In this space, decisions that had seemed weighty felt simpler, clearer. The commission was not just a professional opportunity, but a step on a path that had been waiting for me all along. My evolving relationship with my parents was not a complex negotiation, but a natural unfolding of truth and boundary setting. My two homes were not competing claims, but complementary aspects of a life being consciously crafted. My grandmother had found this clarity in her later years, creating a life of integrated purpose after decades of family complications and deferred dreams. I was fortunate to be discovering it earlier, with her example as both map and inspiration. The weekend of the art walk arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, gentle breezes, temperatures ideal for strolling between studios. I spent the morning preparing my grandmother's space, my space, arranging finished paintings and works in progress, setting out small refreshments, creating a welcoming atmosphere for visitors. Elena came by early to help, bringing fresh flowers and offering last-minute advice. Don't worry about sales, she counseled. This is more about community connection than commerce. Just enjoy sharing your work and hearing people's responses. As the first visitors began to arrive, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach, similar to the exhibition opening but more intimate somehow. These were my grandmother's friends, her artistic community, people who had known and valued her. Their judgment felt particularly meaningful, but my concerns proved unfounded. The local artists and art enthusiasts who flowed through the studio throughout the day were uniformly welcoming, genuinely interested in my work and my connection to Rose. Many shared stories I hadn't heard before, my grandmother's generosity, with technical advice, her dry humor during plein air painting sessions, her advocacy for arts education in local schools. "You have her sense of color," one older painter told me, studying a landscape I'd recently completed. "Bold but not garish, harmonious even in contrast." "And her stubbornness," Elena added with a laugh. "Rose never gave up on a painting until it said exactly what she wanted it to say, even if that meant 20 rounds of revisions." The observations, offered casually but with obvious sincerity, helped me see my grandmother more fully, not just as a relative or role model, but as a fellow artist with distinctive strengths and working methods, some of which, apparently, I had inherited or independently developed. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but elated, filled with a sense of belonging I hadn't expected to find in this community that was still relatively new to me. I had sold 2 small paintings, not part of the commission series but personal pieces I'd been working on in between, and, more importantly, made connections that felt like they could develop into genuine friendships over time. As I closed the studio door after the last visitors left, my phone rang. My parents, calling together from their condo in Portland. "We just wanted to check in," my mother explained after initial greetings. "Tyler mentioned you were participating in an art walk today. How did it go?" The genuine interest in her voice, the effort to stay connected across distance without controlling or directing, touched me deeply. "It was wonderful," I said, settling onto the courtyard bench to tell them about the day, the visitors, the stories I'd heard about my grandmother. "She would be so pleased," my father said when I'd finished, "to see you continuing what she began, but in your own way." The observation struck me as surprisingly insightful coming from him. "I think so too," I agreed. "It feels like, I don't know, like closing a circle somehow." "Or opening a new one," my mother suggested. "Beginnings and endings are often the same thing, just viewed from different perspectives." We talked a while longer, sharing updates about their Bend research, my commission progress, Tyler's recent promotion at Powell's. Simple family conversation, unmarked by the tensions and manipulations that had characterized our interactions for so long. As we said goodbye, I realized something significant. For the first time I could remember, I had ended a call with my parents feeling energized rather than drained, connected rather than constrained, seen rather than used. Another small shift, another indication of healing, not dramatic or complete, but real and continuing. That night, I returned to the studio, drawn by the energy of the day and the clarity that seemed to come more easily in this space. Working by lamplight, I continued development of the commission pieces, each canvas now taking clearer form, the series beginning to cohere into a unified statement. The theme I'd been exploring, integration of seeming opposites, harmony found, in contrast, felt increasingly personal, increasingly true to my own experience. Portland and Sedona. Design and fine art, family connection and individual autonomy, past wounds and future possibilities, all part of a single life, my life, being consciously crafted from materials both inherited and chosen. As midnight approached, I set aside my brushes and stepped back to consider the day's progress. Not finished, not perfect, but moving in the right direction. Much like the journey that had brought me here. To this house, this studio, this moment of clarity and purpose. Outside, the desert night was alive with subtle sounds, a distant coyote, the rustle of wind through cacti, the occasional hoot of an owl. I stood in the doorway, breathing in the scent of sage and earth, feeling a profound sense of rightness. Not because everything was resolved or complete, but because I was fully present to the continuing process of becoming. The mortgage had been paid, the boundaries established, the healing begun, And now, unexpectedly, a new chapter was opening. One I would write on my own terms, with gratitude for the past but not defined by it. A story of reclamation and possibility, unfolding one brushstroke, one choice, one day at a time. Autumn came to Portland with a theatrical flourish, leaves turning crimson and gold almost overnight, morning fog rolling in from the river, the scent of wood smoke and apples heavy in the air. 1 year had passed since that fateful Thanksgiving when my parents had locked me out of my childhood bedroom. One revolution around the sun, and yet the distance traveled felt immeasurable. I stood in my living room surrounded by carefully wrapped paintings, each tagged and ready for shipment to Seattle. The commission was complete, 6 canvases that together told a story of integration and balance, of finding harmony in seeming contradiction. My best work to date, born of both technical growth and deeper self-understanding. My phone vibrated on the counter. A text from my father. "Moving truck confirmed for Saturday. Could use an extra pair of hands if you're free." After months of research and preparation, my parents were finally making the move to Bend. They had found a small single-story home near a community garden where my mother had already reserved a plot. My father had secured part-time consulting work that would supplement their scaled-back lifestyle. Everything was falling into place, a fresh start built on more realistic foundations. I texted back, "I'll be there, 9 a.m. His response came quickly. "Perfect, bringing coffee and donuts." Setting my phone aside, I returned to the task of preparing the paintings for transport. The art courier would arrive tomorrow, and everything needed to be properly protected for the journey. As I carefully taped protective corners on the last frame, my doorbell rang. Tyler stood in the hallway, a bottle of champagne in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. "Thought we should celebrate before your masterpieces head off to their fancy new corporate home," he said with a grin. We settled on my small balcony overlooking the city, glasses of champagne catching late afternoon sunlight as we discussed the commission, his recent promotion, my parents' impending move. "It's strange to think of Uncle Daniel and Aunt Helen not being in Portland," Tyler mused. "But Bend seems like a good fit for their next chapter." "It does," I agreed. "And the distance feels right somehow. Close enough for regular visits, far enough for genuine independence." He nodded, understanding the subtext. "They've really changed this past year." "We all have, I guess. For the better, I think." I raised my glass slightly. "To growth. And to boundaries," he added with a knowing smile, clinking his glass against mine. As twilight deepened around us, Tyler handed me the small gift bag. "Almost forgot. This is for you. Sort of a commission completion present." Inside was a delicate silver necklace with 2 small pendants, a miniature paintbrush and a tiny house key. I looked up at him, touched by the thoughtfulness of the symbolism. "The brush is obvious," he explained. "For your art. And the key." "For reclaiming my space," I finished, "both literally and figuratively." "Exactly." He looked slightly embarrassed by the sentimentality of the gift. "Anyway, thought you might like it." "I love it," I assured him, immediately putting it on. "Thank you, Tyler." After he left, I stood on the balcony watching night settle over Portland, lights appearing across the cityscape like earthbound stars. The weight of the 2 small pendants rested against my collarbone, tangible reminders of the journey I'd undergone. From displacement to ownership. From financial entanglement to clear boundaries. From creative suppression to artistic fulfillment. Each step had required courage and clarity, the willingness to choose a different path than the one laid out by family patterns and expectations. Saturday morning arrived with classic Portland rain, a gentle but persistent drizzle that turned the world soft-edged and reflective. I arrived at my parents' condo precisely at 9, finding a small moving truck already parked outside, and my father arranging boxes in its cargo area with meticulous attention to weight distribution. "Morning, kiddo," he called, using the old nickname that had once been weaponized in manipulative conversations, but now felt simply affectionate. "Coffee's inside with your mom." The condo was half empty, furniture already transported to the new house in an earlier trip. My mother stood in the kitchen surrounded by carefully labeled boxes, checking items off a list with the focused efficiency that had once been directed toward maintaining appearances, but now served a more authentic purpose. "Sophia." She looked up with a genuine smile. "Perfect timing. The movers just called. They'll be here in 20 minutes for the last furniture pieces." We worked together through the morning, loading boxes, disassembling the remaining furniture, preparing the condo for its final cleaning. The easy coordination between us, the absence of hidden agendas or unspoken expectations, felt like its own kind of miracle, small but significant. By early afternoon, the truck was packed and the condo stood empty, echoing with our footsteps as we made a final walkthrough. In the main bedroom, my mother paused, looking out the window at the neighborhood. She'd called home for over a decade. "So many memories here," she murmured. "Not all good, but not all bad either." I stood beside her, following her gaze. "A mixed legacy." She nodded, then turned to me with unexpected directness. "I want you to know something, Sophia. Our mistakes, the way we treated you, the boundaries we crossed, those weren't your fault. They were ours, entirely ours." The simple statement, offered without qualification or expectation, washed over me like warm light. Not because I needed her to take responsibility. I had already claimed my own healing regardless of their recognition, but because it represented how far she had come in her own journey toward authenticity and accountability. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "It means a lot to hear it." She squeezed my hand briefly, then straightened her shoulders. "Time to go. New chapter waiting." We locked the condo for the last time and joined my father by the truck. Rain had given way to watery sunshine, puddles reflecting fragments of blue sky between clouds. "All set?" he asked, handing me a set of keys. "You'll follow us in your car?" I nodded, the familiar weight of the keys in my palm a reminder of how ordinary this moment was on the surface. Just a family move, a common enough life transition, and yet how extraordinary in the context of our particular history. The drive to Bend took just over 3 hours, the landscape transforming from Portland's lush greenery to the drier, more rugged terrain of Central Oregon. My parents' new home sat on a quiet street lined with ponderosa pines, its simple single story, design neither pretentious nor apologetic, just right for this phase of their lives. We unloaded the essentials before dark, setting up beds and unpacking kitchen necessities. As twilight gathered, we sat on the back porch with pizza and beer, too tired for proper cooking but content in the day's accomplishments. "To new beginnings," my father said, raising his bottle in a toast. "And lessons learned," my mother added. "And the courage to change," I finished, completing the circle. As stars appeared in the clear desert sky, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not because our family's healing was complete. That work would continue, with occasional missteps and renegotiations inevitable. But because the fundamental shift had occurred, the pattern broken, the new path established, the mortgage had been paid in full, the boundaries had been drawn and respected, the healing had taken root. And now we each moved forward, connected, but separate, family but individuals, sharing history but writing our own futures. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment or revenge. Sometimes it looks like liberation from toxic patterns, freedom to live authentically without constraint. Sometimes it looks like the moment when parents finally see their child as a whole person, rather than an extension of themselves or a resource to be tapped. And sometimes healing comes not in dramatic confrontations, but in quiet moments of recognition and respect. A mother acknowledging harm without excuses. A father accepting change without resistance. a daughter standing firm in her truth while remaining open to genuine connection. As night deepened over the small house in Bend, I felt gratitude wash through me, not for the trial itself, but for the strength it had revealed, the clarity it had demanded, the growth it had catalyzed. The room I had lost had led, through painful but necessary steps, to the life I had gained. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.